When my landlady showed up late at night, I thought it was about rent, but the way she looked at me said something entirely different. It was late in the evening when I heard the knock. Not loud, not hurried, just a soft, deliberate sound against the wood of my door. At first, I thought maybe it was a neighbor, someone needing to borrow something. But when I opened it, there she was. My landlady. She stood in the dim hallway, her posture as composed as ever, but something about her felt different that night. She wasn't carrying her usual folder of papers, no keys jangling in her hand, no expression of business on her face. Instead, she had this quiet presence, like she had been standing there a while, thinking before knocking. I stepped aside, and she walked in with the kind of grace that always made me a little self-conscious in my own messy living room. Her heels tapped lightly against the floor, and as she passed, a soft fragrance followed, jasmine, faint but unmistakable. I don't know why, but that scent alone sent my heart into a faster rhythm. The room suddenly felt too small for both of us. She glanced around as if searching for the right words before looking at me. And in that glance, something stirred. Usually, her eyes were steady, practical, the kind that made sure rent was on time and the property was respected. But tonight, they lingered. They searched, almost as if she wanted me to notice the pause between her breaths. I tried to play it casual, asking, "Everything all right?" My voice sounded lighter than I intended, betraying the fact that I already knew this wasn't a regular visit. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she moved toward the small sofa, running her fingers briefly over the fabric as if testing its comfort before sitting down. That tiny gesture felt strangely intimate, as if she wasn't inspecting the furniture, but trying to ease herself into my space. I closed the door behind us, and for a moment, the only sound was the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. The silence stretched, heavy but not uncomfortable. She crossed one leg over the other, her bracelet catching the light with a soft gleam as she rested her hand against her knee. Then she looked at me again, directly this time. There was no hint of landlord formality, no distance. Just a quiet intensity that made me forget every casual greeting we'd exchanged before. That's when she spoke, her voice low but steady. "I didn't come here to talk about rent." The words hung in the air, heavier than I expected. My chest tightened, and suddenly, I was aware of everything, the faint warmth of the lamp, the jasmine still drifting in the air, the way my own hands felt awkward at my sides. It wasn't about rent. And in that single sentence, she'd shifted everything between us. I wasn't sure how to respond to her words. Not about rent. That sentence alone had changed the air in the room. I nodded faintly and sat across from her, trying not to stare too much, though every detail about her felt magnified, the way her shawl draped across her shoulders, the faint shimmer of her bracelet when she moved her hand, the composure in her posture that hid, just barely, a softer undercurrent. To give myself something to do, I offered her tea. She smiled, a small, genuine curve of her lips, and said yes. It felt like a relief, something ordinary to hold on to in the middle of this unusual situation. I busied myself in the kitchen corner, boiling water, pulling down two mismatched cups. My hands felt clumsy, and I wondered if she noticed the slight tremor when I set the cups down on the low table between us. Steam curled upward, softening the space, giving it a warmth that felt almost domestic. She wrapped her fingers around the porcelain cup, not sipping yet, just holding it, as though letting the heat sink into her palms. For a moment, her eyes lowered, and she seemed far away, her thoughts caught between restraint and release. "I didn't come here for business," she said finally, her voice quiet, as though she were speaking more to herself than to me. She brushed a strand of hair back from her cheek, her bracelets chiming faintly, a delicate sound that filled the silence. When her eyes lifted to mine, there was something raw there, not the confident, self-assured landlady I was used to, but a woman trying to step carefully into an unfamiliar truth. I swallowed, the question unspoken but clear in my eyes. "Then why are you here?" She seemed to read it. Her lips parted, then pressed together again, like the words were fragile, easily broken if spoken too quickly. Finally, She leaned back slightly, her fingers circling the rim of her teacup in slow, absent motion. Sometimes, she said softly, you get tired of being seen only in one way. As a manager. A caretaker. Someone people deal with only out of necessity. And when the door closes at night, she hesitated, her eyes flicking away as though it cost her something to admit it. It gets very quiet. Her words struck me harder than I expected. There was no drama in her tone, no plea for pity. Just honesty, a confession that carried the weight of someone used to being strong, yet weary of it. I leaned forward, elbows resting on my knees, watching her carefully. The steam from the tea drifted between us, blurring her outline for a moment, then clearing again. She noticed my gaze, and instead of looking away, she held it. There was no anger there, no shame. Just a question she didn't voice, but I could feel it. Do you see me, really see me? And in that moment, I realized, this night wasn't about rent at all. It was about being seen. About connection. About two people sitting in a small, quiet apartment, both carrying unspoken stories, wondering if maybe, just maybe, they didn't have to carry them alone. The room felt different now. The small living room, with its worn sofa and half-dim lamp, no longer seemed like just my space, it had become something suspended between us, fragile but intimate. She sat across from me, her cup untouched, fingers lightly circling its rim as though she needed the motion to keep her steady. I watched her carefully, sensing the weight of something unspoken pressing against her chest. She wasn't here for rent. She wasn't here for business. And now, sitting in that silence, I knew she was deciding whether to let me into a part of her life she rarely revealed. Finally, her voice broke through, low and almost hesitant. You know, people assume I'm always fine. That I don't need anyone. That I'm strong enough to manage everything on my own. Her eyes stayed fixed on the teacup, but her tone was raw, stripped of the polished confidence she usually carried. I leaned back, letting her words settle before speaking. And are you? That made her glance up at me. For the first time, I saw a flicker of vulnerability, a softness behind her steady gaze. She gave a small, almost humorless laugh. Most nights. But not all. Her hand trembled slightly as she set the cup down on the table. The faint clink of porcelain against wood felt louder than it should have. She clasped her hands together, resting them in her lap, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. The urge to reach across the space and steady her hands was strong, but I hesitated. It wasn't just about comfort, it was about permission. I didn't want to move too quickly, to break whatever fragile trust she was building by letting herself be vulnerable in front of me. The silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was full, of questions, of things unsaid. Her eyes drifted toward the curtained window, the city lights faintly glowing behind the fabric. When you go home at night, she murmured, you have someone waiting? Someone to talk to? I shook my head. No. Just me. That seemed to ease something in her. She exhaled slowly, almost as if she'd been holding her breath. Then she turned back, her gaze more direct, steady in a way that made my chest tighten. It's strange, she said softly, to walk into a room full of people and still feel invisible. To manage buildings, tenants, decisions, but at the end of the day, sit in silence and realize no one really knows you. Her words hung in the air, heavy with loneliness, but also with an unspoken invitation. She wasn't just talking about herself, she was testing whether I understood, whether I could carry the weight of seeing her fully. I wanted to answer, but the truth was, my words felt small compared to the depth of what she was giving me. So instead, I let the quiet stand, let my presence itself be the reply. And in that quiet, something shifted. She looked at me, not as her tenant, not as someone younger, not even as a man across the table. But as someone who, in this moment, saw her. Truly saw her. And maybe that was all she needed. After her confession, the room carried a different kind of silence. It wasn't heavy anymore, it was fragile, like a thread holding us together, daring either of us to break it. She leaned back slightly, and I noticed the faintest sigh slip from her lips, as though speaking those truths had cost her more than she expected. I stood, half to release the tension, half because I needed to move, and collected the cups from the table. When I returned, I didn't sit across from her again. I sat beside her. Not too close, not too far, just enough that I could feel the heat radiating from her presence. For a moment, she didn't look at me. Her gaze stayed on her lap, hands folded neatly, but I caught the subtle shift in her posture, the way her shoulders tightened, then relaxed again, as though she was hyper-aware of my nearness. I felt it too. My pulse quickened, not because of anything dramatic, but because of the few inches that now separated us. The room seemed smaller. The faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the ticking of the clock, every sound was sharper against the quiet that settled between us. Her shawl slipped slightly from her shoulder, and without thinking, I reached to adjust it. My fingers brushed against the fabric, soft and warm, and for a fraction of a second, they grazed her arm beneath it. The contact was barely there, but it was enough. Enough to make her inhale a little deeper. Enough to make me want to linger. She turned her head toward me then, her eyes searching, almost questioning. The distance between us shrank without either of us moving deliberately. It was in the way our shoulders brushed lightly, in how our knees almost touched but didn't, in the shared awareness that neither of us was pulling away. "Do you ever feel," she said softly, her voice low and measured, "like the world expects you to stay in a role, and you're not allowed to want something else?" I swallowed, realizing her words weren't just about her job, her reputation, or her responsibilities. They were about this moment. About us. "Yes," I answered quietly, though my voice felt heavier than the single word. Her eyes held mine, steady now, less guarded than before. And for the first time, there was no mask between us, no landlady, no tenant, no rules. Just two people, sitting side by side, their shoulders pressed lightly together as though testing how long the world would allow such closeness. She shifted slightly, not away, but closer, her knee brushing against mine. The touch was simple, accidental on the surface, but it carried a weight far greater than it should have. My chest tightened, and I felt the air between us thicken, almost tangible. Neither of us moved to widen the space again. And that unspoken choice, to remain this close, to let the contact linger, felt more intimate than any embrace could have been. The minutes stretched on, the silence carrying a weight I didn't want to disturb. Our shoulders still rested lightly against one another, neither of us moving to reclaim the space. My heart beat faster with each second, but I kept my breath steady, afraid that breaking the rhythm might shatter the moment. She shifted slightly, adjusting the shawl around her arms. I thought the closeness might end there, that she would pull back, collect herself, remind us both of the lines we weren't supposed to cross. But instead, her hand lowered, inch by inch, until it came to rest on the cushion between us. I felt the invitation before I even looked down. Her fingers relaxed, open, waiting but not demanding. My throat tightened, my thoughts warring between restraint and desire. And then, before I could overthink it, she moved first. Her hand slipped gently over mine. Not with urgency, not with hesitation either, just a quiet, deliberate act, like she had decided it was time. The warmth of her palm spread across my skin, steady and grounding. For a heartbeat, I froze. My chest rose sharply, the air catching in my lungs. Her touch was soft, but it carried the weight of something unspoken, the choice to let this be more than an ordinary evening. I turned my hand, slowly, so our palms met fully. My fingers closed around hers, and in that simple movement, the atmosphere shifted again. Her hand was warm, her skin smooth against mine, and the contact filled me with a rush of calm and fire all at once. Her eyes lowered, focused on our joined hands, as though even she couldn't quite believe what she'd allowed herself to do. When she finally looked up, her expression was quiet, almost fragile, not the confident woman who walked through my door earlier, but someone stripped bare of roles and expectations. I gave her hand the slightest squeeze, a silent promise that I wasn't going to pull away. That I didn't want to. Her lips parted, as though she wanted to say something, but no words came. Instead, she exhaled, and in that breath I felt her surrender, not to me, but to the moment itself. The clock ticked faintly in the background, a reminder of time passing, but it felt irrelevant. The world outside, the responsibilities waiting for her, the reputation she carried, none of it seemed to exist inside this room anymore. It was just her hand in mine. Just the steady rhythm of her breathing. Just the quiet revelation that we had crossed a threshold, and neither of us wanted to step back. Her thumb moved slightly, brushing against my knuckles in a tender, almost absent stroke. It was such a small gesture, but it sent a current through me, something deeper than desire, something that felt like trust. And in that gentle touch, unspoken but undeniable, I knew, this wasn't about rent. This wasn't about loneliness alone. This was about us. Her hand remained in mine, warm and steady, as if neither of us wanted to test what might happen if we let go. The small living room, with its quiet lamp glow and faint ticking clock, felt like a world sealed off from everything else. I could hear her breathing, soft, uneven at times, and I wondered if she could hear mine too. She was the first to break the silence. It shouldn't be happening. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but the tremor in it gave her away. She wasn't scolding herself, or me. She was confessing a truth she'd been carrying. I tightened my hand gently around hers. Why not? Her eyes flicked to mine, startled by the question, as though she expected me to agree, to retreat. But I stayed. I wanted her to know I wasn't running from this, even if it scared me too. She looked down, and when she spoke again, her words came haltingly, as if torn between honesty and self-preservation. Because I know what people would think. Because I'm supposed to be, older, wiser, the one in control. And yet, she stopped, her lips pressing together as though afraid the next words might reveal too much. I leaned in slightly, not enough to overwhelm, just enough to let her feel I was listening. Waiting. Her eyes shimmered when she lifted them again, the faintest sheen of tears catching in the light. Not of sadness, but of something else, the release of a burden long held. And yet, when I sit here, when I look at you, all those rules feel small. The word struck something deep in me. I couldn't help but reach up, my free hand brushing gently against her cheek. Her skin was warm, soft beneath my fingertips, and the moment I touched her, she inhaled sharply, almost as if she'd been holding her breath the entire evening. I let my thumb linger just beneath her eye, brushing away the tear that had dared to escape. She didn't flinch. She leaned into it, just slightly, but enough for me to feel her surrender. Her voice dropped to a whisper, trembling now, I didn't expect to feel this, not with you. Not here. I swallowed, my own chest tightening at the rawness in her tone. Maybe neither of us expected it. But that doesn't make it less real. For a long moment, she studied me, her gaze deep, unguarded. Then she gave the smallest nod, as though silently agreeing, silently giving herself permission. The world outside didn't matter. The judgments, the roles, the expectations, they were distant things. What was real, what was undeniable, was here, her hand in mine, her cheek beneath my touch, the fragile thread of honesty tying us together. And in that moment, I realized, the walls she carried, the ones I kept too, had lowered. For the first time, we weren't hiding. We were simply us. The night had grown deeper around us, though neither of us had noticed until the room itself reminded us, the lamp now the only light, the shadows stretching long across the walls. She hadn't moved her hand from mine, and I hadn't wanted her to. Every second of that simple contact felt like a quiet vow, something we were both afraid to name aloud but unwilling to break. At last, she glanced at the clock, her lips pressing together in a faint smile that held both regret and tenderness. It's late, she murmured, though her voice carried no real urgency to leave. It was more an acknowledgement of time, of the fact that the world outside this room still existed. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. If I did, I might have asked her to stay. Slowly, she pulled her hand back from mine, but not in rejection. Instead, she let her fingers trail along my palm, as if reluctant to let go completely. The absence of her touch left my skin tingling, a phantom warmth that lingered. She stood, smoothing her shawl over her shoulders. I rose too, following her to the door. The air felt cooler there, the faint draft from the hallway slipping in when I opened it. She paused in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dim corridor light, and turned to face me. For a moment, she seemed caught between restraint and longing. Then, with a breath that trembled just slightly, she stepped closer. Her hand lifted, resting against my chest, right over my heart. The pressure was light, but the effect was grounding, as if she were testing the steadiness of what she had just found in me. I met her gaze, and in her eyes I saw no mask, no hesitation left. Only a quiet certainty. She leaned in, her lips brushing against my cheek in the softest kiss. It wasn't rushed, wasn't fleeting. She lingered there, long enough for me to feel the warmth of her breath, long enough for it to become more than a gesture of politeness. It was admission. Confession. A promise. When she drew back, her hand still rested against my chest, feeling the rhythm beneath. Her voice was low, intimate, meant only for me. This isn't about rent anymore. The words carried a finality, but also an opening, a door to something neither of us had dared to imagine when the night began. I swallowed hard, not trusting my voice, so I simply nodded. She gave me a small, knowing smile, her thumb brushing once against the fabric of my shirt before she pulled her hand away. Then she turned, stepping into the hallway. I stood there, watching her walk away, the faint sound of her heels echoing softly until it faded. The door closed gently behind her, but the warmth of her touch, the quiet weight of her words, remained with me. And as I stood in the stillness of my apartment, one truth settled deep in my chest: something had changed tonight. Something real. And it was only the beginning. If this story touched you, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more age gap slow burn romances, and share it with someone who loves heartfelt storytelling. Your support helps bring more of these stories to life.